Which round one wide receiver makes the most sense for the Dallas Cowboys? We'll tell you on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. And on today's show, we are starting some of our draft profiles. One of my favorite times of the year.
Yeah.
The way that we generally do this, just to prepare you for future episodes, is we'll take one position and we'll compare three players, sometimes in the same round, sometimes different rounds, but three players, and we'll tell you what we think of them, how they win in the NFL, and how they fit the Cowboys. Landon, let's start at the very top of the rankings. Tet McMillan, the wide receiver for Arizona, who a lot of people believed early in this process completely out of the range for the Cowboys, but now you're starting to see him fall in some of the mock drafts. What do you think about Tet McMillan, and how does he fit with Dallas?
I'm a little surprised to see his name kind of falling to the Cowboys recently, because I don't feel like there's been much to make his name move up and down. Again, it's sort of like what we talked a little bit yesterday. Maybe it feels like guys are getting kind of artificially pushed up, and then once we get to the combine, it kind of resettles itself after we reminded, oh yeah, this guy is an incredible athlete. Oh yeah, this guy is an incredible athlete. Tet is, it's very easy to see the positives with Tet, right? He's huge. He's 6'5 plus, 210 plus. He was a 4-star athlete coming out of Hawaii. He's from the not the Big Island, but the touristy island on the east side. And he had 3 of his high school teammates all join him at Arizona, including his quarterback that he's had since I think is a prep, like Pee Wee.
Noah Fafita. Yep.
Yeah, and so he originally committed to Oregon and then flipped to Arizona and ended up playing there with his high school teammates. I mean, this guy is a freak, right? You see a lot of these bigger type receivers, and a lot of them are kind of the same, and they usually have a lot of the kind of same issues. He moves very differently than the other guys with his body type, and I think it's because he has a very long torso, and you combine that with very good lower body flexibility, and it means that he plays with like a low center of gravity, which helps him change direction really well for a guy that plays at his size. He's got good but not excellent speed. He can certainly take the top off and play down the field because of his side, and his speed isn't going to limit him at all that. So he's not like a guy that you just have to play on slants or in breaking routes, short stuff. He is a guy that can go up and get the ball, and has a serious my ball mentality. I wouldn't call him like exclusively a contested catch receiver. Like that's the thing you worry about these guys is, did they come into the NFL making a living only on using their body and winning contested catch at an unrealistically high rate in college that it doesn't get that usually does not replicate into the NFL. You don't get away with that. This guy doesn't have to worry about that. He gets good separation in his routes. Absolutely deadly on in-breaking and dig routes. I mean, just maybe one of the best dig route receivers I've ever seen, because he just explodes back inside, and he's so big, and he presents such a large target that he's easy to get the ball to. Is able to drop his hips quickly to get in and out of breaks. Great catcher of the football. He has strong, big hands that absorb the ball. And this is the part of the contested catch aspect that does translate. He's always coming back to the football. He's always reaching back to get it at the highest point, he's not waiting on any footballs to get to him. He's coming when he has the opportunity to stop and come back to attack the football. He's always doing that, not giving the defensive back any chance to get the ball. My only issue with him is that I feel like he's very good after the catch because of the change of direction stuff that we talked about, but he's not. That's all relative to his size, right? Like he's not so explosive that he's going to be able to run around NFL DBs. He needs to play up to his size when he has the ball as a ball carrier. He needs to run through more safety tackles and that sort of thing. Look, this guy is dynamite, right? He is a big time X receiver who can do anything you want. I think he can line up in all three spots and win. I think the size is an advantage. It doesn't dictate the type of receiver he is, and that's a compliment to me. He plays very differently than other wide receivers with his body type. That's a compliment. I really liked him a lot, and frankly, if he shows up at 12, the Cowboys should be giddy and doing backflips to go get this guy.
So, of the top 10 draft export people, and you know the names: Dane Brugler, Daniel Jeremiah, Field Yates, Mike Brennan, all those guys, the top 10. His average ranking right now is 10th. So, very realistic that he could be available around with the Cowboys pick, and that's why we're talking about him, because it's not all that uncommon to see a guy drop 2 spots based off where he's being ranked. But one of my favorite things about Tet is that he's a big receiver that doesn't let the ball get into his body. Like, you'll see him fully extend out to catch every single pass. Like, some of the best hands you'll see. I think the problem that some people are coming back to is, okay, what type of big receiver is he? Because I don't think he's the Mike Evans type where he's 6'5", 240, but he's got that build-up speed to beat you downfield. I think he could do that some, but that's not really his game. He's more like of a short to intermediate type big receiver where you're throwing 10 to 15-yard balls, and that's kind of how you play. So my question for you is he more like Drake London? Is he more like Michael Pittman? Or is he more like T. Higgins with the Bengals?
I think to me, he's probably more like T. Higgins, I think, right? Like, I think he's a big body guy that can change direction and move in a way that you just don't see guys do that on regular way. But at the same time, he's got good speed, but I'm not like, you're right. Like, I'm not like necessarily.
I think he's a better athlete than Drake London, but I don't think, like, if he runs in the 4.4s, I would be shocked.
I would be too. Yeah. He seems like a solid 4.5 guy, which is more than enough speed to get downfield for a guy his size, but he's not like beating a guy off the line who's turning his hips and running stride for stride and outrunning him down the field. So I agree. I like him. I mean, I think I mentioned here that I think you can play him anywhere, and I do. But for the Cowboys specifically, I love him as the X receiver that you can isolate on the backside. You run eights, you run digs, you know, some mesh stuff maybe, and I think you just try to get him the ball. And again, I think you know, I can't remember who it was that said it that said it best, and we hear this phrase all the time. He's open even when he's not open, right? Like, so even if he's only got like a half yard of separation on a slant route, you're throwing the ball to him because he's so big and he's got such long arms and such big hands that he's going to come up with the ball anyway. So he shouldn't make a living that way, but it adds more to his short and intermediate game.
So again, this is I'm going to assume if he's there at 12, that's an automatic run to the podium selection for you, correct?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's wide receiver 1 clearly in this class. I mean, I think even you know, over the likes of the rest of the guys that we're going to talk about and Hunter as well. So I think that if he's available, he's an incredible Robin to your CDs.
Oh gosh, yeah. All right, let's talk about Luther Burden, a receiver that has been mocked to the Cowboys a lot over the last 2 months. How would he fit in with Dallas? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. We absolutely love FanDuel. But now with football season over, we can go bet on basketball. The NBA action is just getting started, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the action or you miss the opening tip-off, you can still go bet on the game whenever you tune in. You can get to stay in the action all game long. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it makes every moment more exciting. Plus, when I win, I get paid instantly, and the app is so easy to use. It's just so user-friendly. Go check it out right now. New customers on FanDuel can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That is FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are breaking down the top 3 receivers, at least our eyes, in the 2025 NFL draft. And let's get to Luther Burden, a receiver that's been mocked pretty frequently to the Cowboys at pick number 12. What did you see when you watched this tape?
This guy is dynamite with the ball in his hands as well, and more so than Tet in a lot of ways. I mean, this guy is one of the classic, you want to get the ball in his hands and let him go type of players. He's got that kind of running back build, right? He's 5'11", 208. And he's a 5-star recruit. I mean, he was a big-time recruit coming out of high school. He's also a big-time basketball player. And you see all that athleticism in his game, right? Like he can separate versus man in single coverage. And look, the numbers right there kind of show you right there. Single coverage, he's in the 92nd percentile. He will add juice to your screen game if you're not trying to like have him go out and run routes. He's a guy that like you could really just feature as a kind of a short to intermediate and screen game guy just because he's so good with the ball in his hands. He'll run through defensive backs, arm tackles. He carries the ball with good pad level and has a nice forward lean. He looks like a running back. I actually thought running style wise, Marcus, like when he has the ball, he reminds me of Dwayne Harris. Like, you remember Dwayne Harris?
Of course,
like,
I remember Dwayne Harris.
Just not necessarily as a receiver, but as a ball carrier. Right. Mm-hmm. Like that kind of like violent forward lean speed kind of action with the ball in his hands. He'll use a start stop and a spin move to get in space to create big plays. His usage changed a little bit. It felt like between 23 and 24. I mean, I watched some of the 23 tape and I watched the 24 tape. And then I had heard that he had better, years in 23 or better production. Went back and saw a couple games of 23, and it was just, it felt off. So I actually went to PFF and took a look at like some of his targeting, and it seems like that Missouri may have not entrusted their quarterback.
100%.
That second year he was a starter. It feels like maybe he took a step back, and so as the season went on, they started to do less and less of the kind of difficult middle of the field, mid-range kind of reads, the kind of out stuff that he was doing before. And it feels like it all shifted behind the line of scrimmage, right?
Yep.
They're just trying to get the ball out quickly to him, just trying to get him opportunities in space. I think the comparisons to Debo are inevitable just because of his type of game and because of the way he plays. But I would say that he's not the tackle breaker that Debo is. I don't think he's quite that level of tackle breaker, but what he is a much better overall skilled receiver, right? Like as a route runner, as a guy who can get out in routes, who can run the whole route tree. His change of direction is elite. His ability to attack the football. You see all the elements of all the different other sports he played in other aspects. Like there was one route where he was running kind of like a sail, or it was like an inside then back out, and the quarterback threw it over his shoulder and he caught it like just skimming over the shoulder, like with a basket catch, and you can see some of the baseball stuff into it. So I just think he's an incredible athlete. He didn't have quite the year this year that he did last year. He was a big time guy on everybody's watch list this summer. But I think that he kind of was let down a little bit by his quarterback, but even despite that, still had an incredible year. And I think is still worthy of a first round, middle of the first round pick, because I think he can be a really super high end, like we're saying Batman Robin, really super high end Robin to a CD's Batman. I don't know that I'd love him as my number one wide receiver.
So you're not wrong. The stats took a big jump back. So in 2023, Luther Burden had 1,200 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns. And then in 2024, the numbers dropped to 600 yards. I'm looking at it right here. 676 yards and 6 touchdowns. Now, he didn't play in a couple of games at the end of the season, still on the sideline, just getting ready for the draft. But one of the biggest reasons why I caution you not to look at that too much, their starting quarterback in 13 games threw 11 touchdowns at Missouri in 2024. The entire offense took a major step back. The starting quarterback, Brady Cook, threw for almost 1,000 fewer yards in the same number of games in 2024 compared to 2023. Like the offense just wasn't as good. So if you're looking at it as like a dominator percentage, the percentage of the offense was still about the same for Luther Burden. It was just the overall counting stats just went down. He also got more attention, but I look at somebody like Luther Burden. And again, if you're looking with us on or watching with us on YouTube right now, there's 3 stats that I like to look at. How you do against single coverage, man coverage, 92nd percentile. How often do you get open? 94th percentile. How good are you after the catch? 87th percentile. If you look at the history of receivers that hit the 80th percentile in those 3 categories, there's almost 0 busts in the NFL because that's the name of the game, right? Like
this whole thing.
Single coverage, get open, make plays after the catch. He's going to test as a ridiculous athlete at 6'1", 210 pounds. My comp for him is not Deebo Samuel. It's actually DJ Moore, who's been saddled with a lot of bad quarterback play. But one of those guys, like, absolutely can be a number 1 receiver. No question about it. But if he's your number 2 receiver, now you're cooking. Like, that's how you have a really good offense. I think Luther Burden in Dallas, where you can put him on the outside, you can give him jet sweeps, you can have him play in the slot, you can give him screens, you get him 7-8 touches a game. He makes your offense that much more dynamic.
Do you think he's 6 feet? Do you think he's confirmed 6 feet? Or
6012, or sorry, 6002. So just over 6 foot.
All right, I'm hoping so because he doesn't look 6 feet to me.
Do you want to know what his projected 40 is?
Yeah, well, let's hear it.
4.34.
If he runs a 4.34, then I don't know that the Cowboys are going to get him at 12. But I think at that point we'll see. But I think that's exactly in line with kind of what you see on tape. I think he is a really good. I mean, I think all these guys, honestly, all 3 of these guys that we talk about would be really, really great compliments to CeeDee Lamb. So we don't need to kind of keep saying that. I think that's the benefit of picking a wide receiver up here is that you feel like you can definitely get one of these 3 guys and they're going to be a compliment. To me, Burden is the guy of these 3, I think, that is the most potentially explosive, right?
Yes.
I think that Tet is a guy that will reliably be a steady Eddie presence. If you can't get the ball to CeeDee Lamb, he's the guy you can turn around and go to on 3rd down to convert for sure. But if you're looking for an alternate guy to add juice to the offense when CeeDee's being focused on, I think that's more of Burden's job because you can just swing it out to him and he can create on his own.
And just to be clear, this is a much better player than like Malachi Corley last year, who Dallas had interest in, because you watch Malachi Corley and everything was at the line of scrimmage, right? Like all of his touches were happening at the line of scrimmage. You watch Luther Burden, especially if you watch the 2023 tape, you see him making plenty of plays down the field on go routes, over routes, slants,
tons of down the field stuff in 2023.
So I caution people that are watching the 2024 tape only and saying, oh, he's a limited route tree player. I think that was more offense than him.
The offense was limited. I can't even get over like how much that quarterback Brady Cook was his name.
Brady Cook,
how much he regressed, it feels like, between the years. And that's really tells the story. Yes, this is definitely not the other kind of guys that often get compared to Deebo Samuels and all these plays. He's much more than just a screen slant receiver. He can run the full route tree. It's just that's all that quarterback could throw in 2024 consistently. So the offense had to adjust.
Last thing before we move on, there are guys when you watch them on tape that just move differently than other players, and he's one of them. Like you watch him move with the ball in his hands, and it's like his feet aren't even leaving the ground. Like he can just kind of glide through. Almost reminds me of Felix Jones sometimes, the way Felix ran, right? Where they just move at a different pace and a different speed than everybody else. I think Luther Burden in the right offense can be a dynamic playmaker in the NFL. Go ahead. Do you have any final thoughts?
No, I mean, I agree. I said Dwayne Harris, but I think that's it, right? He carries the ball like a punt returner, right? Like he's aggressive and fast, and everyone is scared of the fact that he's touching the ball.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about Emeke Egbuka, one of the most well-rounded receivers in this class. Could he be an option for the Cowboys at 12? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Football season may be over, but basketball is in full swing, and there's no better way to stay in the game than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With PrizePicks, you just pick more or less on at least 2-player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. This week, I'm looking at Jason Tatum for more than 29 points. And the best part, PrizePicks is quick and easy, and you can set up your lineups in less than 60 seconds, and their fast and secure withdrawals mean that I get my winnings in as little as 15 minutes. Plus, I love all of their weekly promos. Go check them out. Go download the app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day. 1 in the morning with Tyler Rowland, 1 in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Lena, let's talk about Emeke Egbuka, who seems like he's really rising up the boards over the last couple of weeks. What did you see when you watched this tape?
All right, so let me just pitch this real quick. These other 2 guys, I mean, it's easy to see why you would want to add these guys to your offense. And not that that isn't the case with Emeke Egbuka either, but, you know, Tet obviously has big size. He can get down the field. He can do the intermediate stuff. You see the traits there. Luther Burden, explosive, dangerous with the ball in his hand. Emeke Egbuka's game is a little more subtle, right? Because that's his game, right? He is a high IQ guy. He's got kind of an average height and weight profile. He's not necessarily super explosive or super big or any of those things. But what he does is play the position of wide receiver at all levels extremely well. And I think that this is the kind of guy, this is the kind of number 2 receiver that you get that really kind of helps win championships, right? Because he can do all the stuff that your other wide receiver either can't do or isn't willing to do. You know, we talked about how he's a high IQ guy. He's a great downfield blocker, right? You see him on tape, like blocking for Judkins and Henderson, and just downfield, like sealing guys off and consistently getting the correct angles. That is an important thing. We talked about how that's becoming a more important thing. He's a very high floor player because he's just played a ton of high level football and earned playing time amongst many future pros at the OSU. Look at the stats here. The separation percentage was 90. Sorry about that. Separation percentage was 95%. You know, I think he doesn't really drop the football. No. I think he never has been really, and he's never really going to be the main focus of the offense, right? Like he's always been on a team with incredible other receivers, even as a senior, right? Like dealing with a freshman Jeremiah Smith. It's like
I think he's Ohio State's all-time leading receiver, and he's never been the number 1 receiver at Ohio State.
Which says a lot about him and I think it's in a positive way, right? Because the guy just has always been there. He's like a coach on the field. I think back to that clip of that came out from the I think it was from the national. It was
national championship against Notre Dame. Yep.
Where he was telling the receiver, "Hey, they're isolating Jeremiah Smith. You got to get the ball to him." And then like the very next play was that touchdown to Smith. So I just, you know, and that's what you hear about him outside of that, right? Like no one was surprised by that clip because all you hear about is how smart this guy is. You see it in his routes. He's incredibly savvy as a route runner. He doesn't have like that kind of explosive out of the breaks that you see. Everything is just silky smooth. All his stems look identical. And when they don't, once he gets out of the stems, he understands how to use what speed he does have, and by changing it to gain the separation he needs to get open. This guy doesn't really have problems getting open despite not being the same athlete that these other two guys are, because he's so good at just running these routes. And he's so, just a talented receiver. He's a hands catcher. I did see him use underhand technique a couple different times, more than I wanted. I'm just not a fan of that overall, but it works for him. So it's not a Terrence Williams situation necessarily. He's making it work. So I think, again, another just one of these, and I think that there's just a ton of these super high end wide receiver too, with the upside. I think in a low pass volume offense, you could potentially get by with this guy as your wide receiver one if you have a collection of other guys in the strong tight end. But for the Cowboys' sake, I think he would be a guy that you'd love to have as your number two. And if something were to happen to CD for a couple weeks, he could step in and function as a number one wide receiver while you're waiting for him to get back. I'm a huge fan of his game. It's just a very high floor player who you feel like is going to come in, and play right away at a high level, just because of all of his experience.
Yeah, when I was watching his game, I felt like the lower end scenario for him in the NFL would be like Jacoby Myers, who has been a receiver for the Patriots and the Raiders, just a really rock solid receiver that's going to block his tail off, can play all three receiver spots. Maybe it's not super flashy, but it gives you a good quality NFL receiver. Now, the hard part is like, what's the upside here? Because I think a lot of people would have said the same things about like Amon-Ra St. Brown coming out of USC, like a good athlete, but not a great athlete, somebody who has got good size, but not great size, but does everything that you want, is tough, reliable. But when it comes to the Cowboys, like, you have to figure out like, where's the happy medium? And is that guy worth drafting at 12? I think Egbuka should be a first round pick all day long. But a top 12 pick seems a little rich for me, Layden. But if they traded back from 12 to 19, picked up a second round pick, I'm all in at that point. Like, I think that's a fine selection, but 12 feels a little rich.
I think I would take him at 12 if he was the best player available on my board, because I think you get a bump from a guy like this. And this is how I would argue it in the room. I think this guy's going to be a 12-year starter in the NFL.
I don't disagree.
I think this guy will be giving you, maybe just barely plus, but plus NFL wide receiver play for a decade, right? And just having that kind of continuity at the position and reliability, I think is just, I think it's worth adding a little bit of a bump to his grade to me. And that's the argument I would make, is that I feel like if you get in on this guy and you can, you work on a good relationship, this guy could be someone that, you have on your team for a really long time. Is just a reliable guy that the quarterback loves, that does all the dirty work stuff and will catch the big third down pass when you need it in a key game. So I that's why you need guys like this on championship football teams.
And if you're going to be playing an offense that has more condensed formations where you don't necessarily have one receiver isolated out wide, but like basically two slot receivers that are really close to the line of scrimmage, I think he makes a lot of sense because he does block. He can play at a slot. He's tough over the middle of the field. But if you're asking him to be like an every down X receiver, that's where I'm like, no thanks.
Yeah, that's the truth, is that you're probably going to get more out of him off the line as a Z or as a slot guy. He certainly can play the X. I certainly don't think there's going to be problems with him going out there and running routes there. But I wouldn't have him making my living on the front side of an offense where he's isolated and he's expected to win one-on-one coverage outside against NFL corners. But I think everything else about this guy is top notch.
So just before we go, let's rank these three receivers. How do you have these guys stacked? And is there a tier gap between them?
It's tough, right? I think I rank them probably as we did them, right? Tet, Luther, and Emeke, right? I kind of feel like Tet and Luther are in a tier above Emeke.
I would agree.
But I might even have a tier between Tet and Luther.
I have a tier separating each of these guys.
That makes sense. That's kind of where I feel like I would go. But I think that all three of them are first round receivers. Yeah. And I think Luther and Tet would be, I have absolutely zero problem taking at 12. Emeke, like, it's not that I'd have a problem with it. I just think I wouldn't be as excited as I would Tet or Luther.
Yeah, I don't think you feel like you're stealing Egbuka
That's
at
it,
that
exactly.
play. You know,
Yeah,
it's like,
it's like
okay, that's
those are the guys you feel like you're stealing them, right? At
yeah,
12, Emeka, it's like, okay, that's solid
it's
pick,
fine.
guys. Good job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen of the day. On tomorrow's show, we're going to answer your mailbag questions. And then on Friday, we're doing some more draft coverage, looking at some of the top edge rushers in this class, because we've got a feeling the Cowboys are going to be hunting those guys as well. So make sure you tune in for that. Go download the Locked On Cowboys podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.